the public school versus private school debate. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and tonight I'm joined by a man that you all know very well, man who dedicates a lot of time when it comes to high school football and providing coverage in the area, and that's our good friend Alex Agrella from Recruiting Board. Alex, how are you this evening?
I'm great. I'm great. Fired up to be on. Always good to see you, John. One of my
Same here,
favorite
brother. Always great
people.
to see you. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite people. So I was very happy and excited that you offered me to come on your platform and talk about something we both feel so passionate about. I'm very excited.
Yeah, same here, man. And I think you're right. I think it's a topic of conversation that has existed for a long time. A lot of people have had it, and I think we're living in a time now, Alex, where because of the technology and the platforms that people like us have, we can bring some life to the conversation and bring it to the forefront. And you certainly did that last week with the piece you put out, talking about the need for change and that it's time to change the structure as it exists in Massachusetts, and it's time to separate the public schools and the private schools, and that the response to the video was huge. You got a lot of people that had a lot of good things to say about it. I know that I've spoken to a lot of people in the coaching community that watched it and were very pleased with your work and what you did, and that you brought some light to the subject, because it's like I said, it's been a topic that's been around for a long time. A lot of coaches, specifically on the public side of things, have talked about it. It's a very difficult topic to talk about, though, because, as we always say, there's two sides to every story. There's two sides to every issue, and I think when you look at this issue, there are definitely two sides here. Um, but I think you shed some light, especially with the data that you presented. I think you shed some light into the current state of affairs in Massachusetts when it comes to the public schools versus the private schools.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I love the reception it's gotten, both positive and some people who disagree. And, John and I will get into our viewpoints as well. But it was funny because you had mentioned, you had commentated on it. And I was happy you did, just because I love the debate. And people were automatically texting me like, oh, John said this, John said that. And I'm like, I don't think these people know we've been friends a long time.
Yeah,
And I also think it's, okay when people
yeah.
don't agree on something.
Yeah, and
But
it's not even disagreement. I think for me, Alex, I think for me, I view it as, I think that this is something that we need to have the conversation about. And I think you
yeah,
started the conversation, and now the conversation needs to continue.
yeah,
I think the conversation, though, and we'll get into it as we go along here, but I do think the conversation has to take a couple of other paths as well. But I think my responding to your post was more of me saying,
yeah,
hey man, I think you did great work here. Here's my view of it. And I think I want people to know that we're pretty much aligned on this,
yeah.
but I do think I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, but I think we will agree more than we will disagree.
Yeah. And like I think when I read your tweet too, and I was like, I understand your standpoint as well. You've been around this in way longer than I have, so you understand how the MIA works from so many different perspectives, by the way. Um, so it was just one of those things where it's sparking the debate. It was a wonderful piece. I had so much fun doing it. I had a ton of anxiety putting it out there just because you're not going to make everybody happy. I think people who
No,
know me
no.
know I like to make people laugh. I like people to come to my content and be like, wow, that was cool. That was fun to watch. But with something like this, I've been watching high school football in Massachusetts for a long time now. And the more I watched it, I just felt like the more it needed to be spoke about. And it's a hot topic a hot topic everywhere.
Mhm.
We see what's going on
It's a
in
national
Nebraska.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I crunched the numbers and really starting to think about it, I said these are facts and factual information that we just can't debate. I mean, you know what I mean by that. But
Right.
I just thought about presenting it, and it took me a long time. And when I finally posted it, I was very thrilled to get it out there. But the work just started right when I got out there. Like you said, the conversation needs to continue.
It needs to continue, and I think it will continue. But I do think that it's important that we also talk about the reality that public schools are facing today
Yeah.
in Massachusetts and New England. And New England's very unique because our setup here is not the norm nationally. It's the
No.
exception. And what I mean by that is in other parts of the country, first of all, you don't have the sheer number of Catholic schools that you have like you do
Hmm.
in New England or in the Northeast. You have them in New York and New Jersey, but the amount of Catholic schools that we have in New England and in the Northeast, you don't have that many Catholic schools in other parts of the country. Okay. But the other element to all this is the knapsack, the
Yeah.
private schools, the boarding schools. And so I've always said that, especially in recent years, public schools are in a vice now. You're in a vice and you're being squeezed by the Catholic schools and the private schools. And public school talent now more than ever is being stretched thin because those two elements, those schools, the Catholic schools and the private schools, are dipping into the public school ranks to stay in business in essence. They need those kids going to their schools in order for them to stay in business and operate. And so I think it's a very unique situation that we're seeing, especially in Massachusetts, where you've got St. John's Prep, you've got Zavarian, you've got Catholic Memorial, and they're recruiting kids throughout the different communities in the state in their own way, however they do it. I'm not implying that their coaches go out and do it or however they recruit. They have to recruit. They do recruit. I think that this conversation has to stop on the Catholic side where we're not recruiting. Okay, even if your coaches aren't actively calling kids, they still recruit through the admissions process. They recruit. Even if the coaches aren't doing it, someone's doing it on behalf of the school. And then conversely, as you know, you have the knapsack side, which
Yeah.
those coaches have to recruit. They have to
Yeah.
recruit in order for them to keep their jobs and to keep their football programs alive. And so they're recruiting. And now you've got powerhouse programs like Tabor and BB&N that reside in Massachusetts. And you've had other really good programs, St. Seb's, Milton Academy. So public schools in Massachusetts in particular, and that's the focal point of the conversation, they're in a really tough spot now. They're in
Yeah.
a really tough spot because their kids are getting pulled from those two sides. And let's be honest here, Alex, you can't blame, we live in a free country. You can't blame
Hmm.
the kids and their parents if they're making the decision to send their sons and daughters to Catholic schools or private schools.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. There, I'd say that New England is the only region of the country. I lived in Alabama and I lived in Mississippi, and I actually also spent some time in
And you must have
Georgia.
fit right in. You must have fit in right in at those two places.
All right.
Seamless. It must have fit like a glove.
It took me some time, that's for sure. But there is definitely not, all those have their own high school associations, but then I promise you, none of them have an association within that they can't do anything about. Like the MIAA, those public schools can't do anything about those ISL schools, the NEPSAC schools,
No.
taking their kids.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is sad to see just because you do lose a lot of good kids to that, and it is a free country.
Mm-hmm.
With the whole Catholics thing, I just think, what I'm not going to say that they do just because there's implications behind that with the whole MIAA if they are. So to me, it's like I kind of had said, like, I want to kind of stay out of that. And the piece I mentioned it because, and I kind of wish I didn't, to be honest with you, because I think it kind of steered away from what I originally was saying about just the enrollment numbers specifically and the structuring of the playoffs.
And I do think it's important, and I'm glad you brought that up. I do think it's important to point out that neither one of us is saying that the coaches at those schools are doing it. If you believe that, you're entitled to believe whatever you want,
Sure,
especially if you're on the public side of things. But you have to give people the lawn sign. They have to put the lawn sign in front of their lawn if their kid goes to one of those schools. Why?
sure,
Because if the parent has a history with that school and it's a family lineage thing, of course they're going to support the school and put the lawn sign in front of their house. That lawn sign though is a form of recruiting. And now what the legality of that is or isn't, we're not here to debate that tonight. So again, I do think it's important to point out we're not saying that they're going out there and that they're doing this, but it is happening in some way. It is happening. So it is what it is.
Well, in my opinion, too, and this structure is just so important to this. And that's what I really wanted to shed light on. How the privates are private schools, the publics are public schools. And to me, I don't really care where people go or why people choose to go somewhere. If it is athletics reasons, whatever. If it's just to get better, I don't, that's not mine. The point of this originally is the privates, just they're structured differently than the publics. They can pull from many different communities, while the publics also, some schools might be regional. And people also said to me, hey, well, what about school choice? What about this? There's no public school in New England or probably the country that can pull from 40 communities. There's no public school that can pull from 90, but there are private schools that can. And to me, again, I do feel for these public schools, because when I brought up the enrollment numbers specifically, without throwing out names, but a lot of these schools have 100+ kids on them. And those kids are coming from other communities, which are impacting the enrollment numbers of these other programs. Oh, excuse me, the participation numbers of these other programs. And the public schools, I feel like, and people have always asked me, hey, why don't you come to more public school games? You're always at private school games. And we're just being honest. It's one of those, the private schools have really big games during the year that I like to go to. But I think I just kind of shifted my mindset a little bit recently to, like, these public schools are, somebody's got to speak out for them. Somebody's got to be the person to just say, hey, somebody's getting the short end of the stick there. And it is them from multiple different lenses. So I was happy to just voice my platform. And it's funny, I did get some support from the private schools too. We won't name names, but people kind of said, they're like, you weren't saying anything that's not already been thought. Like, you just brought it to light. And at the end of the day, it's structure. That's all I wanted to really do in this proposal, is just to build structure in this state, in a state that I think needs it. And I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
I do, and it's funny because I've coached at King Philip for a long time, and part of the reason why this conversation is happening is because of some of the comments that were made by King Philip head coach Brian Lee after they lost to Catholic Memorial the first time. I will say this, though. Yes, this has been a topic of conversation, Alex, but this really didn't pick up in intensity until John DiBiase went to CM. That's when this conversation really shifted. And if we're going to have a real honest conversation here, and we need to have it, and I'm going to be honest with you, people that know me, some people like me, some people probably think I'm a blowhard, some people probably think that I have too much to say. I'm going to tell it like I see it. And,
Right.
and if you don't agree with me, I respectfully disagree with you and we move on. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, if we're going to have a real conversation here, we need to look at this we need to look at the entire picture. It needs to be a wider lens. This conversation became a louder conversation after he went to Catholic Memorial. Now, I'm not saying he's the reason it's happening. I'm not saying that he's doing anything wrong. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is it became an even bigger conversation because what it did is it showed you, for one, what a good coach can do for a program. And then if you take a great coach and you put him in a program like that where he has more resources and access to players in other communities, as you mentioned, and he can build a program that has success. I've always said this about John DiBiase. John DiBiase's biggest recruiter is his success. Kids want to play for him because they know they're going to win and they know that he's going to develop them. That's why they want to play for him. So John's biggest recruiting pitch doesn't come from him directly. It comes from his success. And I think people need to realize that. CM sells itself with him there. People know if my son goes to Catholic Memorial, they're going to learn how to play football. They're going to have a shot to win championships, and they're going to have a shot to play college football. And I think that that's really important to point out. All of that being said, I think, yes, I think it's a conversation we need to have, but we've got to be realistic about how we're having it here. And the first point is the Catholic schools are not leaving the MIA.
Hell no.
It's not happening. And I think we all can agree with that. So, with that being the case, how then can you come up with a plan that can address the inequities and that can address the playoff situation and playoff competition while keeping them in the MIA? There's only one solution in my view. Okay. And it's something that we could see a return next spring, and that's the Super 8, because the Tournament Management Committee is now scheduled to vote on it for baseball. There's a good chance we're going to have the Super 8 again in baseball next year. And I think if we have it in baseball and you start to see it in male and female sports, that could be your potential solution 3 to 5 years from now. But I don't think that you're going to see a day where the MIA is going to tell the Catholic schools you have to leave. I just don't think they're going to go public only. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, well, and maybe my message might have been lost. First off, the private schools in the MIA need to stay in the MIAA. Like, they are some of the best teams in it. They aren't going anywhere. Not only that, and I'm going to expand upon this another time, in my videos, but people don't even understand the ISL schools. They would never allow those Catholic schools there because, first off, St. John's Prep, Xaverian, St. John Shrewsbury, they have 175, 200 kids on the roster. Tabor had the most kids on their team last year at 60. And that, I'm not saying talent-wise, but I'm saying just team guys. Like, that is over triple what Tabor has if they're playing prep. And again, we're not saying about talent. We're just saying about numbers. Tabor's the exception, though. Milton Academy had 50-something, and you got teams with 30, and
oh yeah,
and it's one of those things where the numbers just, and then you look at enrollments and you look at tuition, you look at so many different things. They're not comparable, and this was my proposal was just you take those 8 teams, you take the 6 Catholic conference schools, you take Bishop Bean and you take Central Catholic, and you put them just in their own playoff bracket away from the publics, but they're all under the same MIAA tournament. And I think that would be such a purer type of competition because the data shows that their best games, the privates are against each other and the publics are against each other. And people, might say, oh, well, Springfield Central is just going to dominate.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, people might say Springfield Central is just going to dominate. Well, we've never seen that before in terms of, so we wouldn't really know. But in my mind, still, it would be public. They're a public school. They are public school, and these are private schools, and you separate the two. And I think with the Super 8, to me, and I mentioned this in the video, I think what we'd see is the same thing happening. We'd see the same teams just playing. And not only that, I would ask, Coach Lee or whoever, I think that for him or a team like KP, where, it can be tough if you're in the Super 8, right? And you're playing these schools, and history shows it can be kind of tough for them to play a CM or something like that. Why would you sign up for that wanting to play in a Super 8 when you can just go play in your own Division III tournament? You have a higher chance of winning that. And not saying they couldn't compete, because if there's any team that can compete, it is KP and Springfield Central.
You just set the stage for what I'm about to say. And this may piss off some of my KP compadres. Separating the Catholics, that argument takes a hit, though. And I had this conversation with our good friend Adam Kirkchin. Separating the Catholics, though, that argument does take a hit because you look at Springfield Central and King Philip, you mentioned those 2 programs. They've actually had a modicum of success. I don't know why the balloons are flying behind me.
It's Apple products, see?
Yeah, there you go. But they've actually had a level of success against the Catholic schools in recent years. Mm-hmm. Springfield Central has beaten Xaverian, I believe, 3 times in recent years.
They've also been knocked out by them.
They've also been knocked out by
in the playoffs.
But they've beaten them. King Philip in the last 6 years has beaten BC High, Malden Catholic, Bishop Fien, and Xaverian.
Right.
They've lost to CM 3 times in the Super Bowl. That would be the counter argument. But I do think that that makes the argument for Super 8 stronger because let's say you did a Super 8, okay? And I think one of the drawbacks of the Super 8 is going to be it does diminish your division titles. It does.
Yeah.
Because now if and it's harder in football. I think a Super 8 in football is going to be harder to pull off than it is in these other sports. Because in these other sports, it's going to be more wide open and competitive. In football, it's going to be hard because, to your point, St. John's Prep, Catholic Memorial, Xaverian, depending on what Coach Dubzinski does at Central Catholic, BC High with Coach Z, those programs are probably going to be, at least three of those programs are probably going to be in it every year, right?
Right.
Based on track record and history. And now, to your point, now the rest of the field is going to be comprised of public schools. And there are people that are going to say, well, Springfield Central wants to play in that tournament. And I will tell you this, I know a lot of public school coaches that would want to play in that tournament, even though they know that their chances of winning it probably aren't that high. They would still want to play in it because the reality is, if you win the Super 8, you really truly are the state champion. So, I mean, again, I'm not saying that King Philip and Springfield Central are outliers. Okay. Needham beating St. John's Prep in 2024. That's an outlier. You have plenty of examples through the years. North Attleboro beating BC High, Marshfield beating BC High, like King Philip beating CM back in the day. You have plenty of examples through the years. BR beating Xaverian. Public schools have beaten Catholic schools. I know we make it seem like it's insurmountable, but Dan Buron had success at times against Xaverian back in the day. And
Sure.
Xaverian will tell you that. Franklin almost beat Xaverian in the playoffs a few years ago under Ian Bain. So the gap, I don't think, in my opinion, and I could end up getting shit for this, I don't think the gap is as wide as people think. And a lot of people will point to Division One, Alex, and say, well, if you're a public school in D1, you can't compete for a state title with St. John's Prep and Xaverian and BC High being in your bracket. And by and large, I agree with that. However, a lot of the programs, and this is not a knock on those coaches, and I know a lot of them, but a lot of those programs are big city programs that are inconsistent at times. And
Sure.
so it's hard to really look at Division One and say, outside of maybe a Franklin or a Methuen or a Natick, it's really hard, or a Needham like 2 years ago, it's really hard to look at Division One and judge whether or not teams can compete in Division One or not by basing it on the Attleboroughs of the world. You know what I'm saying? So I think that this conversation is a great conversation, and I'm glad
Sure.
that you brought it to the forefront and we had it. But I do think it's a broader conversation. I think simply saying Catholics rule the roost and that's it, I don't think that's a fair conversation. And
Well,
the reality is, real quick, I have a proposal too that I'm more than glad to put out where we separate the Catholics completely, and I'll put it out. I don't care. I'm not advocating for it. It's just for shits and giggles. I'll put it out. But the reality is, it's not going to happen. So who cares if I put it out?
well, and I think that the reason why it hasn't happened is because nobody's trying to make it happen, you know. And now that the conversations are happening, and I'm reaching out, I'm outreaching these ads, and I just want, if we can't do it, I just want to know why. And in the end, all I'm saying
I
is
already know why we can't do it.
just cause, like, but
No, it's
nobody's
not
even.
just because. It's because I'll tell you why we can't do it, Alex. The MIAA will never remove the Catholic schools because A, they've been in the MIA for a while. B, it's money. You know, money drives the wagon,
But we
right?
don't want
And
to
C,
separate them. We don't want to get them out of the MIA. I want to make that very
right.
clear. I'm
You're
just
saying
saying,
separate them in the playoffs.
yeah, I'm just saying separating the playoffs, create structure, because we have, and I have data that supports that the Catholic schools' best games are against each other. Like, I would much rather see CM versus Xaverian or CM versus St. John's Prep than CM versus anybody in Division Two.
Well, you know what
Or
the counter argument to that would be, right?
what would it be?
Put CM in Division One, which is what everybody's been saying.
We can't make them do that. Like, that's their
I
administrative
understand, but I'm
decision.
just saying people would tell you though that's how you fix it in D2 and beyond.
Sure, I get
Is
that, but people, I mean, we can't make them do that. And at the end of the day, that's their decision. But why can't we ask them, hey, listen, we're going to put you in this private bracket. You already play 6 teams every single year in this bracket. So you don't, that's a comfortability level, right? For whatever reason, if their administration doesn't want them to play in D1, that's on them. But I get, hey, listen, I would love for them to do that, but that's not on that. It's not on me. But to me, I think, just to go back to the KP and Springfield Central thing, I think in a lot of ways they are kind of the outlier in some ways because and I have data on this, Springfield Central, KP, and Everett from 2013 to 2025 are the teams that have had the most success against the publics. Yes, BR did have their times back in the day, but in the end, it's those teams that really swayed the data as to over the 100, I think 120 or something games. Like, I want to say Everett was majority of those wins, and then Springfield Central's majority of those wins. And KP's done a good job too, but I think they are the outliers in the situation because Needham, that team was a great team, but it took them forever to get there. And the Methuens of the world, I think that they're doing a tremendous amount of work, and they've never lost more than 2 games in the regular season since 2021. But we see them go against St. John's Prep in the playoffs, and they get housed 30-7. So I think that they would do much better against a Natick in the playoffs or a Wachusett in the playoffs.
Fair enough. So, and by the way, you see this in states like Tennessee where Catholic schools can play public schools during the regular season, but then they play their own separate playoffs.
Absolutely.
In the playoffs. So here's my question to you then. What would be the motivation for Catholic schools to do this? Why would they decide to do this?
It's better games for them, and the data shows that.
But you're not winning a state title though.
You are.
That's my point.
So we've established this. Those Catholic schools are a different level in terms of the competition. You got the Springfield Centrals of the world who can compete, but those Catholic schools, we've never had a all public school state championship. There's been a Catholic school in every single Division I state championship since 2013. So to me, it's like, hey, listen, you eliminate that first round game where you guys are just going to beat a team, and I won't say what team, but you're just going to beat a team, whoever it is, right? And we've been seeing it. And you get to play these teams that you already know, and you get to, that truly is in a lot of ways its own Super 8 in some regards. We're seeing Malden Catholic, who has taken a huge couple steps forward as a program. They made a Final Four run, and they're a team that is okay, well, you got to ask yourself, do we want to say, okay, well, they can compete better against the public schools, so that makes this better? Or, listen, they're a private school. They operate on this structure, then King Philip doesn't. Is this just structural? Is this a competitive thing? And if I'm the private schools, I'd be listen, I get it. And I'm going to pitch it to every single one of them separately. But in a lot of ways, I think it kind of boosts their own notoriety. And maybe kids might be hey, listen, that's the cream of the crop in a lot of ways.
But isn't that what a Super 8 would be, though? Because let's face it, they'd probably take at least 4 of those spots. You can pretty much, like I said earlier, guarantee every single year that St. John's Prep, Zavarian, CM, as long as Dib is there, CM, those 3 will be in it.
Absolutely.
Because you see it in other sports. And that's the other thing that I think is important to point out here. They dominate in other sports too.
Yeah.
Right? But they'll be in you'll have at least 2 of them in the baseball Super 8 more than likely next year.
Yeah.
Maybe 3, maybe even 4. Same thing with hockey. You'll have at least 2, maybe 3. Same thing with basketball. So I think the point is this. I think to do what you're saying, I think for one, you'd have to convince the Catholic schools to do it, which I think would be hard to do because, again, I think they like competing in the MIAA. And 2, I think the other part of it is the MIAA, I think, would need to be convinced that somehow, because who's going to manage that tournament? That's the other part of this. Are they still under the MIAA umbrella?
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
They are, then they can't participate in it.
I mean, they'd all be under the same. It's just, to me, you're adding one more tournament. You're adding one more kind of division in a lot of ways, which some would say we have too many anyways, but
We
you're
do.
adding one more
8
playoff.
divisions is a joke.
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother conversation, but
I know. I'm just saying we
yeah,
already have too many.
I know. Well,
I
to
think
me,
I think the point is all I'm saying is, Alex, I think we're saying the same thing, but I think
sure.
this goes back to the Super 8 conversation. Is that the long-term answer?
I don't know if it is though, because my question to anybody else, and in my opinion, I do think there's a big drop off between KP and, oh no, excuse me, the Springfield Centrals and KP. There's a huge drop off in some regards as to the other teams. And again, I would want to, if I am these certain teams, like say, I don't even want to say a certain team, right? But say I'm at recruiting board high school, right? And I'm one of those coaches and we're having a good year. And all of a sudden you're putting me in this bracket with these teams who are private schools, which historically we've seen, they win 77% of the playoff games against public schools. I would probably be like, I don't want to do that. Like, I would rather go play these other schools where I have a better statistical chance of winning these games. And it would be tough for me as a school. Like in Springfield Central, dude, Springfield Central played IMG. They'll play anybody. They don't care who it is on
Well,
their
that
schedule.
goes back to my point. I think they would want to be a part of a Super 8.
Sure, maybe,
I
but
think they would want to be a part of a Super 8. I think a lot of the public schools would want to play in a Super 8. I
maybe,
really believe it.
maybe.
Think of it this way. Brockton back in the day would want to play in a Super 8.
Brockton's been struggling though recently. They've
I
been
know that, but
trying.
I'm saying back in the day, I think that a school like that, Everett one did was in Everett. They would want to play in a Super 8.
Yeah, well, and people would say, oh, well, they like to point to those examples. And it's just, again, I think Springfield Central, KP are in a lot of ways the outliers. They are the most successful two public school teams in the state.
In recent years, though.
Yeah,
I
well,
think
post
you have
2021.
had in the past, and actually I want to use this as an opportunity. Let me just get these comments in real quick because we can
Sure,
kind of
yeah.
work off the comments. Ken Nally joins us. Ken, thanks for
My
checking
guy.
in, brother. We appreciate you. You're the best, my man. John and Alex, at the end of the day, you both bring great content to the table, and you both do a great job. Glad to be a support. Glad to be a support of both of your efforts. Ken, thank you so much. We appreciate everything you do for us.
My
And I know,
guy.
Alex, you feel the same way as well. A couple points here. Cameron Crazy's 818 checks in. Thanks for checking in. We really appreciate it. DB Hauser leaving Everett really hurt the Publics. I don't think he ever lost a player of note to the Catholics or knapsacks, and he regularly beat the Catholics. That's a great point. Now, that does go back to your point most recently about Springfield Central and KP and how they've had success against the Catholics. Before that, it was Everett that had that level of success against the Catholics.
Sure. We reading the next one.
Cameron Crazy says, who hurt the Publics more, the Catholic schools or the NEPSAC? If the NEPSAC schools didn't exist, I don't think all of their players would go to a Catholic school.
That's
an interesting point.
The NEPSAC schools are hurting both those.
They aren't. Well, especially now because as we've seen, they're starting to pull from Catholic schools now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it's not just Jeff Moore at Tabor that's doing it, by the way. You're seeing it with other players leaving Catholic schools to go to other schools like St. Seb's and Dexter as well, which those schools do a great job of attracting players as well. I think Cameron Crazies makes a pretty good point here in that you got to remember, though, if you go back, let's say 20 years ago,
yeah,
NEPSAC football wasn't what it is today.
No.
It wasn't what it is today.
We have Mike Taylor to thank that. I'd say
probably the last 20 years, it's really, really become a hotbed of high school football, and it's become a hotbed for recruiting for college coaches. But it wasn't what it is today from 20 years ago. You didn't have a powerhouse like Tabor. BBNN was really good. Belmont Hill was really good. St. Seb's had some good teams under Bob Souza, but you didn't see what you see today.
No. Well, we have Mike Taylor, I believe, to thank for that. Mike Taylor from Lawrence Academy built that super team that
started it, really.
It really did, because then people saw that and went, oh, well, I want to be that, and you had to be able to compete, even though it was short-lived. And but I think that kind of really expedited things because they had 11 Division I kids on that team, which at that time was crazy. And I think another thing to kind of highlight in this situation, it's like, those schools are offering different opportunities as well for these kids.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, I also believe that New England prep school football has turned into this hub, and it has in its own ways. But I also think if it were my kid, I would say you should go to these schools for great academics, first and foremost. But I think now it's become like an athletics decision, which a lot, like you said, 20 years ago, it wasn't like it was because I feel like it was more emphasized on academics rather than athletics. And things changed, which obviously we've seen.
Well, and a lot of the recruiting side of it was on the basketball side. A
Yeah.
lot of those schools were known as basketball schools, and they still are. Schools like Winchendon and some of these other schools. Nobles was known as a big hockey school.
Yeah.
But the proliferation of boarding football powerhouses and knapsack powerhouses, Avon Old Farms always was a good football program. They always had
Yeah.
talent. You know what I mean? You can say the same thing about Brunswick and Loomis. The Connecticut schools, the Founder League schools, have always been good football schools, Kent, Taft. But in Massachusetts, it's really been the last 20, 25 years that we've seen this emphasis on football and focusing on football
Yeah.
with these private schools and coaches really recruiting. A lot of that started with John Pappas at BB&N. So
Sure.
I do think that, as I said earlier, right, public schools are in a vice and they're being squeezed from two sides, and it's the Catholic schools and the private schools. And look, I'll say something that I think, and I mentioned this last week, it was kind of an unpopular opinion. I don't think that some public school coaches do themselves any favors. They really don't. We are living in a different time now, guys,
Yeah.
and we have to accept it. And part of the problem is, look, you're always going to lose kids. We've always lost kids. I say this to people all the time. If kids didn't leave the Tri-Town area around here, Rentham, Norfolk, Plainville, if they all went to King Philip, all the Hasselbecks would have played at KP. You
Golly.
know, Noah Sorrento, who was a running back, a very good running back at Zavarian, he would have been playing for us when we lost to Marshfield in the sectional final in 2014. So, and we already had Mark Liebus. We were really good to begin with. So the point is, those kids, Bishop Fian has had kids that would have been KP kids that would have stayed and played for us or played for the previous staff. It's not. The reality is, this has gone on forever. I just think now it's more attention has been brought to it because we're also starting to see public school programs are losing, their numbers are declining, right?
Yeah.
And I think a bigger issue here in a lot of ways is kids not playing sports. People aren't talking about this enough. They're starting to, but it might be too late. And the numbers show it. The data shows it that kids are just not playing sports. I think a couple of years ago, people thought it was a football only problem. No, it's an every sport problem. And that's another
Yeah.
thing we need to fix. But getting back to a Catholic only tournament, I think it's a good idea. And obviously, the public schools would support that as they should. I think it's a good idea. But you said you would pitch it to the Catholic schools. So
Yeah.
if you're in front of Brian St. Pierre, if
Yeah.
you're in front of Al Fornaro, John DiBiaso, Joe Gaff, how do you pitch it to those guys? How do you get them to buy into the idea? Mind you, they play each other during the regular season.
Right.
So how do you get them to buy into the idea that playing in a tournament like that is better for them and their programs than playing for a state championship in the MIAA?
Well, I would stick to the facts. I'd say, listen, I can prove to you that your best games every year are against each other. And I can also, people might say, oh, well, we'll have rematches. We tend to get those anyways in the playoffs. And I would also say to them, I'd be like, you guys playing each other multiple times is only going to be better. I can't think of a reason why St. Pierre or Fornaro or DiBiaso wouldn't want to go at it against each other again. Like
No,
during the year.
I disagree because
Why?
listen, here, I'll tell you why. Because and we mentioned CM playing in Division One earlier, right? You can
Yeah,
opt up in this format. You have to petition down, and the MIA last year did not hardly granted any petitions down with the first three divisions. But the reason why John DiBiase, and I'm paraphrasing here, has said to me and to others, I already play them during the regular season. I
sure.
don't need, when asked why he's not in Division One, he pretty much said to me, I already played them in the regular season. If we won the Catholic Conference because we beat them during the regular season, why do I need to play them again?
And I
That's
mean,
that. I'm just saying that would be the counter argument.
well, and I want to also say the whole Division 2 thing with them, I think that is an MIA issue. They are allowing them to do this. Like,
But here's the
and
thing. I agree with you, Alex. But the problem with that is, in theory, they would have been a Division 3 school last year. If you
sure,
base it on enrollment, they're not even a D2 school. They're lower than that.
sure. And I mean, my pitch to them, though, is just listen, you get to, at the end of the day, it's just you are a private school. Like, you are a private school, and you should, in my mind, these are public schools. You can pull kids from X cities and towns, they can't. And at the end of the day, it's like, hey, listen, I have the data to show your best games are against each other. And DiBiase can say whatever he wants. Like, that's his prerogative. But I think in the people in the numbers would show that these games to their communities, these rivalry games, the kids love those games. And that's one thing we got to think about. What these kids like, I was there when CM, and I mean, they've won on a 2-second, just a trick pass to beat Zavarian in 2023. And then 2024, it came down to a field goal. 2025, it came down to a field goal. That is fun. Those kids have fun. They'll never forget those games. And that's why it's also, I would pitch to them like, hey guys, this is a great competition. We've established those three programs specifically, they're the top dogs in the state. Let's be real. Like, they're always either in the state championship or in the Final Four, and it hasn't been any different post-COVID or before, even sometimes before COVID, right? But that's why I would pitch them. The Malden Catholics of the world, the Bishop Fians of the world, I think that they're trending up, and that data shows that since post-COVID, they've all gone publics again. They've all got positives against public schools, and you put them in this bracket. I think in a lot of ways their notoriety gets also lifted in a lot of ways because they're playing these schools that are at the top of the state consistently year in and year out. And that to me would be a selling point. Central Catholic, the same thing. Central Catholic and is kind of to me, it's like, okay, well, you guys got to go through Zavarian or prep anyways. So, pick your poison. Do you want them in the quarterfinals, or do you want them in the semis, or do you want them in the championship? Like, and that's how the data is also supported. So,
But again, I think the problem you're going to run into, knowing Brian St. Pierre, knowing Alfanaro, knowing John DiBiase, those guys want to play for state championships.
this would be. It
But
would be a state championship.
But it would be a Catholic division championship. It wouldn't be. You would call it the Catholic division.
You could call it whatever you want. In my mind, it's a state championship.
I'm not trying to pour cold water on your idea. I'm just
No.
saying I like the idea. I'm just simply saying I don't see that them playing each other again is not. They already do, right? Let's face it. St. John's Prep and Zavarian have already played each other on Thanksgiving and for a state championship two of the last 3 years. So my point is, I think it's a great idea. I just, realistically speaking, do you see those coaches going for it? I think they're more likely to embrace a Super 8 type tournament than they are a Catholic only tournament.
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, my whole pitch to them, again, it's just we've established they're the best of the best. Like, those teams, and they're doing well, and they're putting up numbers against public. I would ask them, what are you gaining out of this? Like, I would ask, I mean, whoever it is, whether it's Zavarian, CM, or whoever, like, what do you gain out of playing this first round game against X public school that they know going in, they're going to win that game?
Alex, you can make that argument for Publix versus Publix too, though, man. 2 years ago,
It's
KP played Diamond Voke in the first round. Like, you
sure.
can make the same argument, man. You
Sure,
really can.
you could. Well, there's always going to be mismatches in the playoffs. No
Right,
matter
regardless of public or
you can be in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, or Alabama. There's going to be mismatches in the playoffs. That's just how it is, right? In this format, though, it's just simple. It's privates versus publics, and it's more stable. And I think you'd see more upsets in Division One potentially. Maybe not. I could be wrong on that, but we've never seen it before. In my pitch, if I'm talking to Springfield Central, and this would be my mindset, I have not spoke to Dwayne Early about this. This is just my question to him: is you've only been knocked out by privates since 2022. Only you've only lost to private schools. So my question would be: say you take them out of the equation, would you rather play teams that haven't knocked you out, or would you rather play teams that you haven't played before? I don't know what his answer would be. I know if that were me, I'd say, you know what? We can play them in the regular season. That's cool. Well, hell, let's line up let's play as many Catholics as we can in the regular season.
But they're again, but
Let's
to
go.
the earlier point we made, they're the outlier. Don't forget they also beat Central Catholic in the Super Bowl in 2021.
Oh, of
So
course.
they're
Of course.
they're an outlier. And again, I think it's really three schools we're talking about here, though, realistically speaking, and that's Xaverian, St. John's Prep, and CM. Outside of those, I mean, I don't want to disparage or disrespect the other Catholic schools, but the other Catholic schools, if you focused in on them, they haven't had nearly the success against public schools that those schools have had. BC High, Central Catholic, Bishop Fian, St. John Shrewsbury, they've all routinely lost to public schools.
But St. John Shrewsbury, I mean, they've won 75% of their games against public schools since 2013. Like, and they
Right,
do
I
well.
understand that. But what I'm saying is, if we're being realistic here in this conversation, the conversation centers around three schools, and it's
Sure.
those three.
Sure, but I mean, at the end of the day, I just say they're privates, they're publics, and that's all it is. Like, it's just different operations when it comes to a private school. You got admissions, my whole thing was just like, listen, if you pay tuition, you go through the admissions process at the school, and you can drive there, you can go there, and you can't do that. If I live in, I don't know, Somerville, I can't go to Needham High School, and that's what's tough about it.
Cameron Crazy checks back in. The last four Sam Xaverian games came down to the final minute. The last two Xaverian St. John Prep Super Bowls have been classics. How do people not want to see more of
My
those
man.
matchups? I don't think it's that people don't want to see more of those matchups. Again, I think let's not miss the point here. The point is I'm being honest when I say this. I just don't see any incentive for the Catholic schools to want to play in a Catholic school only tournament. Because in the end, even if it's their own division and they're, quote, a state champion, it's just a Catholic Conference 2.0. It's a Catholic Conference tournament. Now, again, I don't have a problem with the idea. I like the idea.
Sure.
I just don't see any world in which they're going to agree to go along with it. And to be honest with you, the only way it happens realistically is if the MIA goes to them and says, this would be best for you and it would be best for the publics. Let's separate come playoff time.
Which
But
I think they should.
they
Like,
won't. But
well,
I know that organization well, Alex, as do you. But I'm just telling you, if we know what we know about them, they're not going to do this. They are a very, very difficult organization to motivate to do a lot of things. And they tend to be reactionary, but I just don't
sure.
see them. You got to remember the other part of this that I think is important to point out is the Catholic schools have a strong presence on a lot of these committees in the MIAA. So that's going to be the other part of it is that it's going to be hard to push something like this through because you're going to get pushback on the competition committee. You're going to get pushback on the TMC because they have a presence on those committees.
Well, I also think rather than treating them like they did anything wrong, I think it's important to note what they've done. And yeah. Anyway, sorry. We'll look at the next comment.
Uh, he says, would you give top public schools the option to play in the Super 8 against other Catholic schools. My guess is Central would want in. Heck, 2023 KP could have beat any Catholic school on any given day. That is true. I think if that KP team in 23 plays CM, I truly believe they would have beat them in the Super Bowl. So that was in my 16 years coaching at King Philip, that was our best team. That was our best team. And that team in our 2016 team, I think, could have played with a lot of Catholic schools. But yeah, again, look, I think it's a good idea. I'm not
Yeah.
poo-pooing the idea. I have a hard time believing that the Catholic schools are going to buy into something like this, though, because I think they want to play for a true state championship. Again, in other states it works, but as you guys know, New England is very slow to adapt when it comes to certain things. They're
Sure.
very stuck in their ways, and I don't. The Connecticut plan is the best plan for high school football in Massachusetts, in my opinion. We'll never see it happen because they don't want to extend the playoffs another week because they're afraid of the winter coaches and them bitching about it. And then on top of all that, they don't want to go to lesser divisions and they don't want to make it more competitive by just picking the top 8 in each division. I mean, it's
Well,
that that just goes to show you if that plan can't get any traction, and it's good for the game in the state, then this will have a hard time getting traction.
Well, John, and I think somebody actually just texted me and brought up a good point. They said, I guess we'd have to ask why the Catholic schools, it's about buying in, but the public schools didn't buy into this. Like, they didn't buy into having to play these schools who are dominating them. And one thing about the Super 8 I want to add on to is that a point I made, which I think people should be emphasized, is sure, we had Everett. We have Springfield Central, who won Division One state championships, and Needham also got there. Needham had 3 Division One kids on that team. Springfield Central had 9 Division One kids on that team. That's not I made sure to count that right. And then Everett, when they won it all, I think they had 7. That's not happening at these other public schools. So if I am one of these other public schools,
but most years your Catholic schools in this area, outside of CM in recent years, aren't going to have that many Division One kids either, though.
Sure, but they also have kids. They have more kids that are going to go on and play at whatever level, even because those are just the Division One kids. I'm not talking about the Division Two and Division Three kids, and you can win with those kids at a very high level. By the way, like if you get 6 division, like KP is a perfect example. You guys might not have a Division One kid, but you guys got what 9 or 10 Division Two, Division Three kids. And that's why you guys can win at a high level every year, because you have dudes that might not be the Division One, and that's okay. You can win with those types of guys, though.
Right, but that's a separate issue, in my opinion. That's a program development issue, and I think at the end of the day, again, if you build your program the right way and you have tradition in your community and in your school, and kids want to be a part of it, you'll be able to compete. You might not be able to compete with Zavarian and the prep at CM, but you'll be able to compete with some of these other programs. And again, look, you're talking to a guy that's coaching a program that's lost 3 state title games to CM. Believe me, we live with that every day. We wear it. But I think at the end of the day, again, I like the idea. Separate them in the playoffs. And then public schools can decide whether or not they want to play them during the regular season. But I still don't see this happening anytime soon.
Sure.
Because again, what is their incentive? They're basically playing their Catholic Conference schedule again. And I think if you gave Finaro and St. Pierre truth serum, do they really want to play each other in the Super Bowl week after Thanksgiving? I wouldn't want to do that if I were a head coach. I wouldn't want to have to play my Thanksgiving opponent a week later for a championship. I would rather play somebody else. So,
I think they would. I think if you ask those two who they'd want to play, they'd say they play each other all the time. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but I mean the kids like that though. The kids love seeing that game. Like I went to a
right,
CM hockey game.
But it's the kids of those two schools because they're rivals.
Sure, right. But even CM, I've been to a CM Zavarian game where there were 4,000 people. Like in Central Catholic Prep, those games are pretty good too. And I mean, it's to me to me, I just feel like but first off, I think that you and I, by the way, are helping at least getting this out there because the MIA is not going to do anything if they don't see how big of an issue this is. And people like you and I bringing it on our platforms, talking about it, engaging in the conversation is at least helping, like more than it's hurting, by the way. And again, it's just I wanted to pick up the sword and the shield and fight for this cause because and I'm not going to stop. If people might say, hey, listen, you're wasting your time. Until Bob Baldwin or whoever says, listen, this is not happening and this is why, then I'm going to report to my audience. This is why it's not happening. And I encourage everybody out there, by the way, if you're a parent or a player or a coach and you think that there should be change, to it, use your voice, incite it. You talk to your athletic director about it. Because it's a lot different if I'm reaching out and saying, like, hey, you know, whatever athletic director, can I talk to you about this? Or, hey, 10 parents have come to us and said this. This guy wants to talk. Like, let's do it. And now, to me, it's like the only way to create change if we really want to get behind it. But to John's point, though, he's got a lot of like, the MIA is not just going to do this just because I say we need to do it. We need to push it.
Well, but the thing is, who's pushing it?
I think there are a lot of ADs.
If the public schools are pushing it, they're pushing it because they want them out. So that's not going to.
Out and separated aren't the same things, though. Like, I know.
If they're not. But Alex, if they're not playing in the MIA state tournaments, they're out of the.
They are, though. This would be an MIA state tournament. It's just adding another one. That's all it is.
Right, but
it'd be under the TMC.
But this is an organization that prides itself on equity. And if we're going to talk about equity,
sure.
Now we're segregating schools because they're Catholic schools.
No.
Again, I'm just playing devil's advocate here. That's how we're going to view it.
Absolutely.
You're talking about the same organization that took away the Super Bowl breakfast because, well, let's be honest here. Let's put it on the table. They took it away because, girls' sports complained, soccer complained. And so they said, oh, well, we're not going to let you play your championships at Gillette Stadium, but to appease you and make you happy, we'll take away the Super Bowl breakfast from these boys who worked hard to get the opportunity to play for a state title and go to the breakfast. So,
I mean, there's a lot of things, though, because then we could say, well, why are we holding the state championships for soccer at this school or whatever, but they're at Gillette. Equity can be used as a weapon more than a shield sometimes, and people might just say, oh, well, it's not equitable. Well, I don't think 77% of playoff wins going against one side of the state or private schools is equitable at all. And this is basically the vocational schools have their own state championship as well. Are we segregating them just because they're vocational schools? No.
But I'm just telling you, I think it's important, though, that when we have this conversation, there needs to be a level of pragmatism here in that it would be a great idea to do it. I just think ultimately their way of doing it is going to be, especially if it passes in baseball, they're going to try to figure out a way to do a Super 8 in football. And in the way it's going to, and I will say this, I think there's going to be a lot of support for it. Because if you do it as a pure tournament where it's 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, you lose. First of all, you'd get 2 weeks to prepare for the playoffs because you'd be playing one less playoff game, which I think a lot of schools that would be playing in the Super 8 would sign up for. And then I think the other part of it is you talk about big crowds. And especially if, let's say, you do get a Xaverian St. John's Prep again, or a St. John's Prep CM, or a Xaverian CM, that would draw a big crowd at Gillette. I think you're more likely to see that than them saying, okay, Catholic schools, we're going to give you your own Catholic school division, and you go in and you play in that division. And by the way, if you want to see what that world looks like, look no further than Rhode Island. Rhode Island has been wrestling this. They've been wrestling with this for years. What do you do with Bishop Hendricken and LaSalle? Because Hendricken dominates every single year. And what they did is now their latest, endeavor is, well, let's pick 4 teams that are going to make this separate state championship bracket. We already know Hendricken and LaSalle are more than likely going to be in it. So now, who are 2 publics that are willing to compete against them for this penultimate state championship? It's the reality of the world we're living in, right? You just said it. 77% of those schools win playoff games. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that says it all.
Yeah, against the publics, and
Yeah.
again,
So
there's no way that
there's no
everybody's going
doubt.
to
I
be
guess my
happy.
point is this, Alex. There's no doubt something needs to happen.
Yeah, there's no situation is going to make everybody happy, and not everybody's going to win in this situation. I believe that there has to be a change, though, especially now that we're seeing revenue go down in the MIA state tournaments. Like, if that doesn't show that things need to change, then some sort of innovation has to happen on the MIA side, because then things aren't going, like, it is not normal that there was $725,000 worth of revenue generated in 2022, and now we're at 200 and I think 80 something thousand. I think that that's because you're seeing the same teams in the state championship, specifically for male sports. We're seeing, in football, I can speak to. We're seeing the same Division I teams. We're seeing, in terms of, we might get a different. But look at when Needham High School made the state championship against the Bear. I put what it looked like. The Needham, who hadn't made it since 2011, they packed it out. Then they have a female student body. So, there has to be some sort of change. I believe it's with what I propose, but hey, listen, like, it might not be that. I can settle for other things. I think that at the end of the day, though.
At least you're somewhat realistic about it. In November, I drafted the New England Catholic Conference.
Yeah.
I drafted a proposal that I was going to put out where they're completely removed from the MIA.
No,
and they would have been separated into classes.
John, we can't do that because, and I just want to say this, and I know you're on my team when I say this, I don't think that we need to make these Catholic schools look like they're some sort of villains when at the end of the day,
that
like,
is how they're portrayed, though, in the public schools.
Right, and I
be realistic about it.
Well, no.
And I agree with you. They're not villains, and they shouldn't be painted that way. Because let's not forget, we live in a free country. People choose to send their kids there, and a lot of the kids that go to those schools, oftentimes, are legacy families.
Sure.
So, like my wife, her family is a legacy family of Bishop Fian. So, like, look at that. You're all excited. Fireworks behind you.
And there's money. There's a lot of money in these states, and if you go and look at where these kids are from, there's money. Like, and there's a lot of other things we'll talk about why people might be choosing it. But at the end of the day, it's like, let's not get fixated on the fact that these Catholic schools have these kids and stuff. I want to get fixated on just creating structure in this state where you got publics playing publics in the state in their own state championships, privates playing privates, and
I think we should call them Catholics, because to me the private schools
Catholics. Sure. Like, yeah, and there's no private school that I suggested that's not a Catholic school. So yeah, but yeah, I think it's just creating structure, and I don't want to make it seem like they're doing anything wrong when I just think that this is how things have developed in this state unintentionally. And I don't want to even make it seem like the MIA or the TMC is doing anything wrong either, because they're not responsible for somebody choosing to go to a Catholic school. Like, they're not responsible, but what they are responsible for is creating an equitable, fair playoff format that suits as many people as possible. And I don't think when you have the Catholic schools from 2013 to now winning 77% of the games, I don't think that's equitable at all. Oh, Cameron's on fire tonight. Cameron Crazy, you're on fire.
He says, how would CM, Zavarian, St. John's Prep do against NEPSAC schools? I'm not saying they'd beat Tabor, but I think they'd hold up well. Much more depth since they have 80 to 90 kids on the varsity roster.
Yeah.
So here's my answer to that. When we lost to CM in 2024, we had a really good team. We were coming into that game on a 25-game winning streak, King Philip. When we lost to them, I believe they were the best team in New England. Yeah, I heard people complaining about, oh, we lost the Super Bowl to this team, to that team. And my response to that was, boo hoo, we lost to the best team in New England. I really believe that 2024 CM team would have beat anybody in New England. Anybody. And I think the point that Cameron makes about the depth, that's a big part of it. And you
Yeah.
alluded to that earlier, Alex, and I think it's important. But I think that 2024 CM team with Mackay Dodd and the backs they had and that skill group, along with what they were up front, I think they would have beat anybody in New England.
Well, and people I also think don't, when they say NEPSAC, they don't understand. Like, I think that there is a different level
Well, that's
between.
why they're in classes now.
Well, right. Well, there's a different. If you have PGs though, like the
Yes.
Willistons
There's
of the
two
world, the
separate
Phillips,
groups of NEPSAC schools.
that's a different level. Like if you can get imagine 7 PGs, you can get a Christian McIntyre, you can get whoever just for 1 year.
Right. Well, look at Avon. You get Mackay Volsey from Bedford and
Yep.
Christian McIntyre.
Right, and then you get reclass kids on top of all that. And this is shout out to Jeff Moore. He kind of well versed me in this. He goes, those schools have way more older kids than the ISL schools. So I don't think if in terms of like the Founders League or the NE Prep, I don't think it's compared to even put those schools in the same bracket because they have kids that are it's just a whole different level.
Like Williston, Northampton, like
right.
Phillips Exeter. Yeah,
the ISL schools is different, and this might piss some ISL people off, but I think that they wouldn't. I think the Catholic schools, the CMs, Avarian, and St. John's Preps of the world, I think they'd beat pretty much everyone, minus Tabor. And I'm sorry for anybody that might have thinks differently on that. Tabor's just on a different level, but they would beat most of them. One, because of depth, and two, those roster sizes. Well, I just said that, but then a lot of these kids at those schools, the Zavarians, the CMs, like they're going on and playing Division II, Division III, or Division I football. While a lot of those kids that went to those NESPSAC schools, they might not have gone there to play football necessarily. They might have joined the team, but you got to kind of play with what you got. And if one kid gets hurt at a NEPSAC school, it's hard to replace a kid like that.
Matt McCarthy checks in. He says, I'm in Hockomock League territory, and just 20 years ago, the big three of Mansfield, North Attleboro, and Foxborough were on a comparable level to Zavarian, St. John's Prep, and BC High. Things have changed quickly. Yeah. It's an interesting point you bring up, Matt, and this goes back to the argument that I made earlier, that I don't think the gap isn't as wide as you think. I know the 77% number would suggest otherwise, but this is a recent stretch of dominance. Yes, Zavarian was good in the 2010s, but you can't say the same about the Prep. They weren't very good every year. It was very up and down at times. They had some really good teams, they had some good teams, and then they had some not so good teams. CM is the one program that you look at before DiBiase got there. They were wildly inconsistent. You had Alex Campia there, Dennis Golden, Brett Williams for a year. Like they had a lot of coaching turnover. They were wildly inconsistent. Publix would routinely beat them. Same thing with BC High. It's really Zavarian and the Prep. And look, St. John Shrewsbury was a powerhouse program for a long time too, but they never really ventured out here. But it's really those three. And I'd throw Fian in there when Jack Peavy was there. Kurt Smith was there. They were really good. But again, this so-called Catholic dominance that we're seeing now, it really, outside of maybe Zavarian, it's really kind of a recent phenomenon. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well,
we have to be realistic about it, to Matt's point.
Well, and I think to Matt's point, though, that was 20 years ago. We live in the right now, and right now, all those schools are dominating. And since COVID, I mean, we don't even need to talk about, the other schools, but even the schools like Fian and Malden Catholic, they are positives against the public schools. And right now, the gap is going further.
Though, because I don't think you can put them in the same conversation because Publix have beaten Fian through the years. Publix routinely beat Malden Catholic through the years.
We can,
I don't think you can put them in that same conversation.
We can only because they're private schools. We
I
can.
understand that, but if we're looking at this realistically, this is really a three-team conversation, and it's the teams we've been talking about the whole show.
I
It's
don't.
outside of that. Yes, the numbers may suggest otherwise, but I'm telling you, Alex, it's not. They're at another level in comparison
Sure,
to these
they
other
are.
Catholic
They
schools.
are. Central Cat, but in theory, if these schools are able to pull from that many communities, right? In theory, I don't think Malden Catholic built that giant $80 million indoor facility to be bad at football. In theory, if you can get kids from other towns, other cities, or whoever, and say somebody wants to go there, they can flip a program like that. While a team like
Well, they
Needham
can,
can't.
but again, you can't combat that though. Like we've said, it's a free
Right.
country. If people want to go there, they're going to go there.
Absolutely.
And
But they
and I
can do
think, and
that.
look, I'm going to say something that's not going to be very popular for my public school brethren. I think there's a lot of public school coaches out there that work hard, do a great job, work hard to build a program, and there's a lot of guys that, quite frankly, need to step it up. Now, look,
Yeah.
if a kid decides they're leaving, they're going to leave. There's nothing you can do about it. As I said earlier, you've got a lot of these families in these Catholic schools are legacy families. Parents have gone there, siblings have gone there. They're going to go there. There's nothing you can do
Sure.
to stop that. I think for public schools, though, the bigger issue in a lot of ways right now is how do you combat your kids leaving after year one, year two, year three to go to these knapsack schools and reclassify? Because the reality is, if they don't have a connection to that school, the reason they're going there is that someone is selling them a bill of goods that they can get them recruited. And some of these knapsack coaches are terrific at getting guys recruited. We've seen it. But I think public schools, we can do this. We can have this Catholic school tournament. I still think public schools have a lot of other problems they need to worry about. But
Sure.
namely, kids not playing. That's number one. We have to figure out why kids all of a sudden have decided they don't want to play sports. Because even if we get the Catholic schools out during tournament time and they play their own tournament for a state championship, that's still not going to solve the dilemma of why aren't kids playing sports? How do we make our schools more appealing and show kids that if they stay here and play for their community, that they can get college opportunities like those kids that are going to knapsack schools, like those kids that are going to Catholic schools. So public schools still need to clean up their own shop here because we have a lot of great coaches out there that are working hard, doing a lot to keep kids in their community and in their school. And then some coaches aren't. And of course, now you're starting to hear the other arguments. Now regional schools have a real advantage because of the success of King Philip. Now all of a sudden, regional schools are a problem. Well, King Philip, again, to go back to our earlier point, is an outlier. And with all
Yeah.
due respect, a lot of these other regional schools, Silver Lake hasn't been a football power in recent years. Triton Regional hasn't been a football power in recent years. So let's not get stupid with it. And by the way, I
True.
hear it a lot coaching there. King Philip didn't drop to Division 3. They were put in Division 3 because of enrollment. The school's enrollment has gone down significantly since COVID. So much so that they're not playing in the Davenport, which is the small side of the Hawk, starting this fall. It has nothing to do with them trying to get away from CM. It's a numbers game. The enrollment numbers have dropped. So
Well, I would say though, I'm not obviously KP is the outlier, but hey, I'm just gonna be honest. If I'm one of those D2 teams, I'd want to leave to go play in D3. Like I would, because I think the data
yeah,
shows that it's
yeah,
been tough. Like, and it's
yes.
to me, it's like it's only been getting worse. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where the MIA has to look at the facts, not my opinions. Look at the facts. Like these teams are doing better and better every single year. And one thing I think that might get kids to go out for teams is if they are able to play in a state championship where they actually might have a chance to advance in it. And we're being honest, there's a lot of these Division 1 teams who have great regular seasons and then they go and play a Catholic and they go, "Aw, dang, this is going to be a lot," and they get crushed, and it's not fair.
Cameron says if DB Hauser were still at Everett, they'd be right up there with X and St. John's Prep. 2023 KP was better than CM and could have beat the two teams in the 2023 D1 final. X St. John's Prep 2024 KP was the second best team in Massachusetts. Yeah. I think
Well,
all valid points, man. And I think, you got Springfield Central. Look, you've had some really good programs. I think at the end of the day, and then when we think about public schools, Situate, Herb Devine has won 4 state titles there in the
yeah.
last 9 years. There's a lot of good public school programs that can probably hang with a lot of these Catholic schools. It's those big three, though. Those big three, in a lot of ways, they're the ones right now that are creating this imbalance. And look, I'll say this: I wish you luck in your pursuit to try to
Thank
make
you.
this happen. Um, I'm going to be the guy that puts a pin to your balloon, but it's not happening. I do think, though, the Super 8 piece is the thing to keep an eye on here, because if it gets approved in baseball, we may universally see it across the board in boys and girls sports. So
Well,
we'll see.
I'd settle for something like that too. I want change, like just change, And what my proposal was, I mean, that'd be cool if it happened, but I just want change,
No, and
John.
I think, listen, and I think you've made a lot of valid points. Something does need to change.
Right.
Something does need to change. And I think at the end of the day, what that is, I think people need to be willing to have conversations to figure it out. But I do think something does need to be changed. Question is, how do you go about it? Do you say to the Catholic schools, go the way of the knapsacks and go do your own thing? Do you
No.
separate them at the tournament time, during tournament time? And the other thing to keep in mind here is, what does this mean for other sports? We're looking at it from the perspective of football only, but what does this mean for other sports? Do you do this in other sports? I suppose if you end up doing a universal Super 8, then it'll probably end up happening in other sports. But we'll see. But I still think, I will say this, and this is important to me right now. We have to figure out why kids aren't playing sports. I think, in my opinion, I think it's more important than the Catholic school dominance the last 6, 7 years. I really do. You're seeing it across the board, Alex. Kids are not playing sports. Here we are talking about knapsack football. Knapsack football is in a tough spot for a lot of these schools. Everybody looks at Tabor and BBNN and Milton Academy and to a certain degree Williston and Avon and those schools, and thinks, well, those private schools have an inherent advantage. They do not. There's a lot of schools playing in the knapsack that struggled to finish their season. They have 20, 25, 30 guys. So
Yeah.
the reality is, kids are not playing sports, and those schools rely on multi-sport athletes.
Yep.
Even if football is your number one sport, you're expected in a lot of those schools to play other sports. So we need to make that a priority. We need to figure out why our kids aren't playing sports, because not all of them are going to Catholic schools and private schools. A lot of them
Sure.
are staying and playing for their schools in their communities, but a lot of them are opting not to play. We got to fix that. That's a real problem. And in a lot of ways, I think we got to fix it before we fix anything else. That's something we can fix. Let's see if we can get it done. Alex, I want to say thank you for taking the time, man. It was great talking to you, great catching up. Always great to see you. And it's a great conversation. You did a great job with the piece. I thought you put a lot of work into it. And I think you've made this a centerpiece conversation that needs to be had. It's needed to be had for a while. And now I think it's top of mind.
Thank you, John, and I really appreciate you offering your platform to me. Um, and I think this was fun. This was
It
fun, and we
was.
don't have to agree on things, but we
No.
heard each other out. And all my fans from Recruiting Board, everyone go follow John right now.
Yeah. Back
Subscribe,
you as well. Yeah.
subscribe, follow, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and same goes for Alex. He does great work, and and I say it all the time. And his recruiting fairs are something that, what we need. We need kids need help getting recruited. So for the
Yeah,
high school coaches out there, I mean, if you're not following Alex in recruiting board, make sure you're doing that. But also, just keep following for his recruiting fairs and reach out to him to see how you can get involved, because it's one of the best ways you can help your guys get recruited. So
my
get them in
man.
front of these college coaches, and I think it's vitally important that you do that. So make sure, if you're not following Alex, go over to at Alex Agrella and that recruiting board and follow him, and make sure you get in touch with him when it comes to these fairs, because again, I think kids need help getting recruited. He can help your kids get recruited. Alex,
Appreciate
great
it.
job, man, and looking forward to seeing you down the road. We got the showcases coming up, so
Heck yeah.
I'm sure somewhere along the way we'll run into each other.
Thank you, John.
And hey, happy nuptials coming up here soon as well.
Oh, thank you. May 30th. That's the real big. That's my Super Bowl.
There you go. Listen, don't F it up. Don't fumble the ring.
Oh, golly, I hope not. I hope not.
Oh, you got this, brother.
Thank you.
It's great seeing you, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you, John.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight.